From sunny Austin, Texas, it's the Counselor Dynamite View, coming at you.
And welcome to the Counselor Dynamite View, based out of Austin, Texas. My name is Star Burgess, and joining me are my co-hosts Crystal Kale and Jenna Fleming. We're so happy that you're joining us for this month's show. Today's topic is going to be parenting styles and boundaries in parenting. So when we talk about parenting styles is basically how we raise our children. And then when we talk about boundaries in parenting, it's the rules that we establish for our children so that they know how to behave appropriately. Do you all have anything else to add to those definitions?
They sound great to me. I was just going to say parenting is one of the toughest gigs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Amen to that. Oh, Lord. I also think sometimes it's the story that we tell ourselves about what parenting is or what it should be. And sometimes we hear that from our own experiences of being parented, which kind of creeps in.
So the 4 different types of parenting styles, and they may be called different things, but the basic 4 types of parenting are authoritarian, which is more of the parents have set the rules, they expect the children to follow the rules, and that's the way that it is. Then we have the authoritative, where there is more of the balance between structure and rules and the love and nurturing that occurs. Next we have the permissive style of parenting, where it's basically like anything goes. The children don't have very many boundaries, and it's all about how the parents love their children and how the children love their parents. And then finally, we have the final parenting style, which is the indifferent, which is almost neglective parenting, where there's really no expectations from the parents academically or with achievements or even with how they behave, and the parents really take care of just those basic needs, but there's not a lot of involvement in terms of the parenting. So again, the 4 different types are authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and indifferent. What do you guys see in the schools, or what is your particular parenting style that you've noticed?
Well, I think we were talking a little bit about how, with everything, we can put labels on so many things, but it's really hard to find somebody or a parent who is strictly one style or another. So I think that my own parenting style, where I think all of our goals would be authoritative, to have that balance of love and nurturing with the boundaries and expectations. I think sometimes I can be permissive. Sometimes I can also be a little authoritarian. But I think really what I have found is those are times when I've been stressed out and when I have been acting as a parent reactively instead of thoughtfully and more proactive in my approach to setting boundaries and expectations and thinking about infusing natural consequences rather than my reactive, part of it. And that's also where I found as a school counselor that parents will come to me with questions, concerns, being stressed out, and often it's when they are at those times of stress. And so talking through them, I found that they too want that authoritative style of parenting, but it's just hard to capture and get at all times because we're human. I don't know. What about you in your school?
I would say I see all of them. You see mixtures. I totally agree that I've never come across somebody who's totally this is them. I even with my parents who can somewhat be that indifferent, which is almost a little bit neglectful. There are times where they step up to the plate or where they do things. So you see a mix, I think, through all of them. Personally, I think that I'm definitely a mix, and it goes back to that where my stressors are. If we're screaming about nothing, you can chill for a little while, but eventually I'm like, just because I said so,
yes.
And it's like, this is how it is. And, or you get to where you're like, whatever, this is whatever go, so, but I think that that's just human nature.
Yeah.
I think when I started off with Lil, Clyde and I, fortunately for us, we both have very similar parenting styles, Clyde and I. And I think I really attribute that as to where we came from with our own parents. I would have to say that throughout my childhood, my mother probably started off as a little bit of authoritarian, but not to the extreme. Because to the extreme of authoritarian is the love is based on if you do what I say. And so I think authoritarian in a small dosage, my mom was, because she had certain rules, and it was, these are my rules, you're going to follow them. If you don't, there are going to be those consequences. And I believe as I got older, she became more authoritative, where she began to let me test kind of out my reasoning skills, and I knew what the rules are. We did the same thing with Lillian in our own home. Clyde grew up very much with probably the same thing. And so I'm hoping that as she's continuing to get older, that we're really moving more towards that balance of authoritative. When I'm in my practice, I see a lot of parents who seem to be at times indifferent because they don't know how to handle the issue that their child is dealing with. So we have a kiddo that's coming in for counseling, and they're dealing with self-harm, such as cutting or the things that fall under self-harm. The parents a lot of times don't know what to do with it, and they become like, I don't know what to do, and I don't understand it, so you take care of it. And it gives the impression that they're indifferent, but I just think they struggle with, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think by and large, I can't speak to every human being, but we all love and care for our children, and we want the best. But I think sometimes those, well, this is what I grew up, this is what I knew, that can come into our mind and mantras. And then also I've noticed that as a parent, parents and adults who deal with stress by withdrawal, typically I've seen that they are a little bit more on the permissive or, on maybe not neglectful, but hands off, I don't know what to do, I'm kind of escaping this parenting thing. And then people who sometimes go for more of an attack to deal with their stress or wanting to grasp control. A lot of people that have a lot of anxiety sometimes want a little more control and try to grasp for that, can go towards more of those authoritarian tactics in parenting of, listen, this is the way it is, and kind of think that slamming down the hammer is going to, I'm going to show you who's boss around here.
And I think at certain ages it works. It's not until they get older. Don't you find that as it gets older, the authoritarian, by the kids being so young, they are kind of, they do, the parents bring the hammer down, the kids follow the rules a lot of the times. But it's not because it's a respect thing, it's a fear thing.
I think kind of what I hear you saying more is that when a child's younger, boundaries are firm. When a child's young, you have really firm boundaries. It's more this or this. And as they get older, you have your boundaries loosen a little bit, where there's a little bit more gray, and a little bit more where your expectations are a little differently. For me, when I think about your authoritarian parent, I think it's this way or the highway. It's my way, and that's where their thought processes are coming from. You do what I said because I said it. Not you do what they said because I'm trying to protect you, or I'm trying to keep you safe, or I'm trying to keep you from harm. For me, there's that's where the difference is, and it's the reasoning behind it is different. And I think that you can have a little bit of different ones in there. There are some parents who are more authoritative, who have authoritarian tendencies, but they're not coming from you do it because I said. They're coming from you do it because this is what's going to keep you safe.
Now, I think what I was saying is that when we use the authoritarian tactic with children when they're younger, I think that the children respond to it, and they, I won't say agree with the parents, but they do what they need to do when the parents ask them to do, because out of fear. I think that when they get older, I think that the kids have a different perspective of what they think their rights are, and then they behave other ways, and they're not necessarily going along with the parent who is trying the authoritarian tactic.
Sure.
You could look at it as fear. I guess it's just how you see the glass in the situation.
Yeah.
Because, developmentally, the younger the child, the more they want to please.
Yes.
You are their world. And so for me, I look at it not so much as fear, but it's, you're my mom and you want me to do this, and because you're my mom, I'm going to do that. And then as they get older and realize, oh, you're not so important. There's other people in this great big world. Then I think that's when the
Authoritative.
Things become more like fear based.
But I think that's we have to define then what is bringing the hammer down.
Yeah.
Because if we talk about bringing the hammer down and there's the consequence of a spanking, I think that it could be more fear. But I do agree that developmentally children have that natural tendency to want to please. But I think it depends on what does that mean when we say bring the hammer down.
And I just got to add, I think it depends on the child as well.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because I have personal experience that really completely is on the opposite of what your experience is maybe with your children or the kids that you've worked with. Because I have a child who is very resistant to any kind of authoritarian or I will tell you what to do. And she's highly responsive to choice and positive reinforcement. And it's a matter of setting those very, very clear expectations, but within those clear expectations, giving her a lot of autonomy, even as a young toddler. I found that, and my husband as well, because what ended up happening is we were really struggling with our power struggles and battles, and then home wasn't as peaceful as it could be because we couldn't physically keep her in timeout, because I guess the hammer down for me was you're in timeout, or you're going to get a dirty, a mean look, or you're in trouble, or you have a consequence. And I do believe in consequences, especially natural consequences, but I also believe that it really kind of have to cater to the child. Every child is different. And her personality is to resist. And so by giving her a little bit more of that freedom of choice. So when I look at things, we actually set up, I was about to lose my mind, I'll be honest, because I was really stressed out. I tend to grasp. I'm more anxious when I respond to stress. And so I was grasping for control and finding I was controlling nothing. And so we actually, my husband and myself, sat down and we said, we need to get on the same page because it was actually interfering with our marriage.
So you're talking about you both had different parenting styles, and then you guys had to get on the same page about your parenting styles.
We were picking a lot of battles, and I was finding that I was concerned with things that he wasn't concerned with. He was concerned with things that I felt like, got to let that one go because of, our child's personality. But so we actually have 3 clear expectations.
So your non-negotiables.
Our non-negotiables, yeah.
And this is something that you all got together on, and as a team, you and your husband decided what the non-negotiables would be, and then you talked to daughter?
We talked to our daughter, and at the time she was 3, and so she had some communication skills, but they were limited, but we put it in really kid-friendly language. And it's language that she can understand, and they're actually still, she colored our expectations. It's hanging in our home. And our expectations are sweet hands and body, sweet voice, and mind, mom, and dad. And so that's pretty much covers it all, and it's very understandable to a child of what she should be doing and what we should be doing. Our hands and our bodies and our voice should be sweet as well. And then it's clear, and then from there we can point to the expectations when there's a behavior that is not in alignment. And we use it with our other child. It's it's stood the test of time for as long as it's been, and that really helped. Also, the power struggle between my spouse and myself, because parenting can really put a wedge between spouses when there are different expectations, or you have those different stories about what parenting is in your mind.
Right, those roles you bring in from your family,
your upbringing.
This is how your great grandmother did it, and your grandmother did it, and your grandma, anyway, and so you bring those into play there. And I think there's a difference between male and female. Like, that's huge. That's one of the things that we do a lot with parenting and within our home is, just simple things. My son's 15 months, so it's, when he falls, my instinct is pick up, give a kiss, just basic stuff. My husband's, you're fine. There's blood coming out of his mouth, but he's fine, and not to that extreme, but sometimes I feel that way. But even in just little things, I think sometimes, so it's so important to sit down and talk about what's the non-negotiables. Because instinctually, different things are going to be important to you based off of just the way you're raised and genetics.
Your husband has, your son, then he's got it. We have an understanding in our family of our values, our non-negotiables, and so he's got it. He can handle it the way he is choosing to handle that.
I think Clyde and I, and again, we were just very blessed, and I think we came from, again, similar backgrounds in terms of how our parents parented us. Mm-hmm. But I think we all, I know I'm guilty of it. There were things as I was growing up that I would say, I'm going to be so different that way. Mm-hmm. And I find that I am my mother in a lot of ways, which is a good thing because she did a very good job in raising me, not to sound kind of, I don't know.
Big-headed?
Yes. But she did a good job because she put the time and the energy in with me, and she did set those rules and those expectations. We do that with Lillian. And I think that for us going from a little bit of that spectrum of that or authoritarian, a little bit of that over to the authoritative as she's gotten older has been so helpful. Because what I try to explain to her is that the rules are not just for you in this home. We are also preparing you for how to navigate life. Mm-hmm. When you're out in that world. You're going to have to understand, what boundaries are. Not only as it exists in our home and following the rules in the home, but what are you going to do when you get out and you're having to navigate people? Mm-hmm. And when you're in school, how do you then navigate and be respectful of the rules that your teachers have in place, or the school rules, or just whatever? You're establishing kind of a foundation for your children when you do that.
It kind of sounds to me like the first, parenting 101 is communication skills.
Yes.
It's kind of like what I'm hearing us all talk about is that not only with your child, but with your partner as well.
Especially with your partner.
Exactly. Being on the same page. It's not a divide and conquer situation. You have to be in it together.
Because don't you see that? Don't you see that in the school systems?
Oh,
when
yes.
you have the mom or the dad comes in and the mom or the other partner is not on the same page. You can see it right away. I see it in my practice a lot.
And you sabotage that other parent.
Yeah, well, when they bring
your family.
When they bring the child in and under the assumption that the child is the one that needs the counseling, and they look at the child as being the problem, and also having to talk to the parents about this is a family unit, this is a team. It's not necessarily the child's fault or your fault or mom's fault. But it is the problem of the family. And so we have to look at the family system and not at the individual person, because we find a lot of times that the child is responding or reacting to what they're getting or they're not getting in their environment. And so when you're talking to parents that way, sometimes it's clear, and then sometimes they're wanting to, it's a power struggle between myself and the parent, but it's how I present it to them. And when you can provide them with some really good information, some feedbacks, a lot of times they'll listen.
Yeah.
And I love that. I know I found personally in working with families, what you feed grows. Mm-hmm. And so when you put a lot of energy and focus into the problem, this child is the problem, or this behavior is the problem, or, whatnot, then that is what will grow in your life, in your home, in your family. And so by focusing on, but here's where we want to go. This is what we want to be. And so even sometimes creating a vision for your family, or, this is what we want our home to sound like. This is what we want our home to feel like. This is what we want to have in this home. And then nurturing that. There are positive reinforcement systems. I know teachers use them all the time. We hear a lot about that. And sometimes that can be really helpful. Sometimes it's an external reward that you don't want to tag on forever, but it can be very helpful as to get kids on the right track and focusing even parents more on looking and finding those strengths and those positive times
and I think that
in their children.
Incorporating that also into some family time where you talk about as they get older as a family, and I think we talked about this one time before, where you get the buy-in from the children. Like you sit down and we talk, because I think at first you talk about that with your spouse, and you all get on the same page, and then you all talk about how we want the family to look and to sound as the children get older, because I think that their view changes as they get older about what we like the vision to transition to, because they are getting older.
Yeah.
And so giving them an opportunity to have some more input, not to tell you what's going to happen, but just to say, you know what, as you're getting older, we respect that you're kind of wanting some things to change. And I think that's okay too.
Well, I think that's a good place for when you have those consequences come into play. If these are our expectations, and they, may have changed somewhat, but they're still pretty much the same. We want you to be a good person. You always want somebody to have nice hands and a nice voice, and to be kind, and those types of things.
But that
especially
doesn't work
when you're 18.
You need to talk about curfew.
Yeah,
and stuff
exactly,
like that.
exactly. But those so your consequences fall into play there too. I think for that adoption.
For Lillian, one of the things that we do, and this is funny that you say that, curfew. Our negotiation is always about bedtime, and always wanting. Everybody else at my school goes to bed at this time, and why do I have to go to school at this time? And then we start talking about in terms of when you get your stuff done, and it's in a timely manner, and we see that you can manage time. Those are the reports that you get, and then maybe we'll talk about negotiating that
You
time.
mean you don't say because everybody else doesn't live in this house?
No, I used to do that with some things with Will. Like I would say, I'm not their mom, I'm your mom.
Yeah.
Aren't you so lucky? Aren't you blessed to have me as your mother?
One of the things I'm so thankful about, as being a parent, is that I was a teacher before I became a parent, because those things that you think will never come out of your mouth when I was teaching went flat out of my mouth. Well, they're not in our classrooms, so we're not going to worry about them. It's like it changes a little bit, but it's still kind of, and I guess it gives you a little perspective, because you can look at it and kind of laugh about it later. And what are some things that yes,
Much
I want to
later.
keep this, or what are some things that I need to throw away? I remember counting, like my first year teaching that counting. I'm gonna count to 5, because they're all in chaos. And
watch out.
Exactly, and I can remember thinking, this is horrible. This is horrible that I'm doing this, and so then it became a game. If I get to 5, then that means you didn't get it done. And oh, well, I'm going to pick somebody else to do it. And so it made it a contest. And it's like, that's one of the things that it's fun to be able to take that and use that as a parent now, is that it's more of a game. You get to tweak it and use it differently.
You make it positive. I mean, that's the nice thing about it. And I think that when the kids get the concept of, particularly in boundaries, that boundaries are not set in stone. They grow as you grow. And what I mean by that, or they change as you grow. Not grow as you grow, change as you grow.
Yeah.
So, for example, of the curfew or of negotiating bedtime, again, as you are doing what you're supposed to do, those things don't have to be set in stone. We want to reward you for awesome behavior.
And I love that. When you show that you can be flexible as a parent, you're also showing the child that you are important and I consider you and your special needs. I know what also has been helpful to me as a counselor, as a mother, as a wife, is using statements that are enforceable, things that I'm actually going to do, and not focusing on fighting words. Don't you look at me like that. Young lady, you're going to go to bed right this instant, or whatever. Those are fighting words, and actually our kids use a different part of their brain when we engage in conflict with them and when we have those power struggles. And when I use more thoughtful words of what I can do, what I personally as a parent have control over, and what will happen, I find it much more effective. So it may be something like, you need to be in your room at 8 o'clock, because I can't really control her when she goes to sleep or when he goes to sleep.
But you can control her being in her room and in bed.
I can control her being in her room, or not out in the living room, or the television's off. I can also control something like, we'll go get ice cream when the dishes are done. We can, I'll be happy to give you this when that happens. And those are things that I have control over and kind of avoid that conflict.
I was going to add real quick to that before you, is that I think that's huge advice to give to parents and to remember, because a lot of times when you're angry, you throw out a consequence you're never going to follow through with.
Isn't that the worst?
And not following through with a consequence you give, a boundary that you've set, in place is more detrimental. And so I think that's great advice to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
And aware.
So what are some things that we want the viewers to take away from our topic of parenting styles and boundaries in parenting?
Go ahead.
I'd say just that. Don't write a check that your butt isn't going to cash. Make your words golden. Use enforceable statements instead of those fighting words. And set up some time with your spouse beforehand so that you can get on the same page of what your expectations, what your boundaries, what those non-negotiables are before you start kind of going into the dark and just maybe possibly having other power conflicts and struggles.
Yeah, don't be an island. Parenting's difficult. It's one of the hardest things to do. Use your friends, get help if you need help. There's lots of great books and resources. Just being aware and realizing you're not alone. I think sometimes, especially when parents have difficult kids, they really feel isolated. And no, you're not alone. And probably, I guarantee you, there's other people who have experienced what you've experienced. So just to remember that and keep that in the back of your mind. And nobody's perfect.
And I also like the idea of, and I think, Jenna, you mentioned this, that you cannot parent all children the same.
Yeah.
That really paying attention to the different personalities and parenting along to that child's needs and giving them the power of choice, all those things are important when you're wanting to really be able to set boundaries in parenting. So having a good, firm understanding of who you are as a parent, who your spouse is a parent, talking, coming up with that plan, and then also remembering that our children are their own individual person and we can't parent them all the same.
Yeah, I agree. And I love great resources. I am a reader at heart. I've recently read, it's an ebook that I really love. It's written by Joseph Sanok, and it's called Mental Wellness Parenting, a Remarkably Simple Approach to Making Parenting Easier. And you can get it on your Kindle. It's just an ebook. It's a quick read, and it's really geared towards parents who don't have a whole lot of time to read. So it's got a lot of great strategies. What about you, ladies?
One that I have read this summer was Your Guide to a Happier Family, and Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish, I think is how you pronounce her name. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. It's just got some really great common sense parent advice. Really talk about the power struggle and taking the power struggle out of situations. And it's really easy read. It was written a while ago. So when you read it and you're reading some examples, just remember that. But it's a great book. Lots of great advice.
And the book that I really am liking is called The Parent Effect, and it's by Joanne Carlson. And the book really focuses in on not only different personalities, parenting styles, but it also focuses in on the parents, the mom and the dad, sitting down, having good communication, and then also how do we then take that information from the parenting styles and really be able to have a happier and well-balanced child.
That's great. So if you guys are looking for links to these book picks as well as some other book picks and more resources, please log on to our website, www.counselordynamite.com. A lot of our resources are geared toward the Austin area, so if you're looking for additional resources, please look into your local newspapers or possibly your Chamber of Commerce to look for more resources in your area.
If you have questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can go to our website at www.counselordynamite.com and type all those on there. Please be patient with us. We'll get to you as soon as we can, and make sure that you're being constructive if you're going to give us any feedback.
And again, we are just so happy that you're joining us for this month's show. We hope you will join us next month when we will focus on bullying. Remember, you can subscribe to all of the Counselor Dynamite Views shows for free at www.counselordynamite.com. And remember to follow and like us on Facebook and Twitter. Until our paths cross again, we wish you great joy, happiness, peace, and health.
content of the Counselor Dynamite View, owned and operated by Life Mentors Counseling, PLLC, is intended for general information purposes only. The information, views, and opinions expressed in this online talk show are not specific medical, financial, legal, or counseling advice. The content of this video is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent a situation or condition. Individuals with mental health concerns should consult their doctor and/or mental health care provider for professional medical advice, medications, or treatments. If you have a mental health problem, we encourage you to speak to your doctor or mental health professional immediately about your condition. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to the Counselor Dynamite View, the show hosts, or Life Mentors Counseling, PLLC, whose words and/or opinions appear from or on this show.